Welcome to another coding tutorial, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to make this kinetic typography that rotates around a circle. Let's start by defining a variable called sentence, and sentence is going to be a string of text called hello. Now we have a string of text of a size 5 because there are a total of 5 characters in here. But to draw a string of text around a circular path, what I actually want to do is that I want to have an array. And this array is going to be occupying by a substring of each of these characters. And I can do that quite easily using a method inside the string class called split. And what I'm going to do is, how about we start by defining another variable called sentence array. And sentence array is going to be set equals to the string here, sentence dot split, which is the method I talked about. And we need to put in an argument. And the argument that I'm going to put in is this empty string here. And the argument here is a separator that tells the split method how we want to split this piece of string. And once we do this, if I print sentence array, now we have an array of size 5, each with a letter from the string hello here. Great. Next, what we're going to do is that we're going to draw each of the letters here around our circular path. So we need to define x and y coordinates. And to get an x and y location around this circular path, first we're going to use trigonometry, specifically the equation x equals to r times cosine of angle and y equals to r times sine of angle. And we're going to set the radius r equals to, how about 150, and then the angle I'm going to start at 0. And I'm going to be using degrees, so I'm going to change the angle mode from the default radians mode to degrees. Alright, so inside draw, I'm going to use a for loop to go from I equals to 0 to I less than the length of the sentence array. So sentence array dot length I plus plus, and then we're going to draw each of these letters on the circular path, and we can do that using the function text. And the first argument of this is going to be the text that we want to write. So we want to write sentence array of I, right? Each of the characters here, and at location x and y. So if we do this, we don't see anything yet because we also need to use a translate function to translate the origin from the top left corner here to the middle of the canvas. So width divided by 2 and height divided by 2. And as you can see here, all of the letters are on top of each other because we set the angle to be equal to 0, which is this point here, and we're drawing all of the letters at the same location. How I want to approach this such that we can draw each of the letter around the circular path is by using the rotate function. And I need to provide an argument here, which is the angle at which we want to rotate it from this point here, which is angle equals to 0. So I'm going to define a variable called, how about starting angle, and it is going to be evenly spaced around the circular path here. So what we need is first divide 360 by the length of this array to get the angle that would evenly space each of the letter out, and then we multiply it by I. And then we just put in starting angle here. But why is it not evenly spaced out here? And this is because whenever we use transformation functions, we need to think about where is the starting point at which we want to do that transformation. In this case, we want to rotate the angle starting from where the angle equals to 0. So if I were to print starting angle here, because the array has the length of 5, we have the starting angle at 0, 72, 144, 260, and 288, right? And as you can see here, when I equals to 0, then the location of the letter H is at 0, which is fine. When I equals to 1, it is still okay because the starting angle in the previous one is at 0, so the next one, E, is at 72. But then the one that no longer makes sense is when I equals to 2, right? Because it actually starts to rotate not from this point, not from angle equals to 0, but from where angle equals to 72, and it rotates by 144. And that is why this gap is much larger than this gap. So what we want to do is that we want to use two functions, push and pop, to save the transformation and returns it back to the default angle before we do another rotation, which is where angle equals to 0. So now we're rotating by 72, by 144, by 216, and then by 288. And to do that, we basically just put in push before the transformation function here, and then pop at the end here. And then now our string of text is spaced out evenly. Instead of doing it this way, you can actually approach it a different way, which is if we don't use the push and pop function here, right? So instead of getting these angles here, if we were to just get the starting angle or the angle increment by dividing 360 by the length of the array, if I print this, then each of the length here will be equal at 72. So as you can see here, it's still spaced out evenly, and that is because each of the rotations starts from where the previous rotation was. So it is rotated at 72 degrees each time. And this way you don't need to use the push and pop functions. All right, but I'm going to do it with the push and pop function, but you can choose the way that you want to do it. All right, and then next what we want to do is, how about I want to actually make the size of the font a little bit bigger. So let's do text size to be 20. Ooh, and then I forgot the push and pop. And then I want to now rotate this whole string of text, and I can do that by using another rotate function here. And I'm going to put in angle, which starts at 0. And what we can do is we can just increment the angle by, how about 1 degree at a time. And then now our string of text is rotating in a circular pattern. Before we move forward, let's put this inside a class. So let's come to this arrow here, click the plus sign, and click create file. I'm going to call this class type.js. And then now, before we start writing a class, let's go to index.html, come to this line of code, copy and paste. We want to do this so that we can integrate this new JavaScript file into the program. And all you need to do is you need to put in the name of your new JavaScript file, which in my case is type.js. All right, so now we can go to type.js and start writing a class called type. And inside the constructor function, let's see what we need. So I'm going to put in actually all of this. So we have sentence array. First, I actually want to set sentence to be equals to a parameter called sentence. And this sentence array is going to be this dot sentence dot split, right? And we're going to set first the radius to be equals to, how about we set it as a parameter as well? Angle will start at 0, and then x will be equals to this dot r times cosine of this dot angle, and then this dot y will be equals to this dot r times sine of this dot angle, which is set to 0. All right, so now let's do a method called display, and what we need is, so we don't need this anymore. We want all of this. Okay, so it's going to be separated into a display method and also an update method. So first, what's going to be inside the display method? So rotate can be here, this dot angle, this dot sentence array, starting angle, this dot sentence array, this.x, and then this.y, and I want to put this.angle, the increment here, actually inside update. All right, so how about we just start by creating one type object. So let's go back to sketch.js, and then we're gonna call it t, and t is going to be a new type object. And inside here, first we need sentence, which we just put in the sentence here, hello. And then we need the radius and also the angle, right? So let's define radius again at 150, and then, no, we don't need angle, do we? No, because we set angle equals to 0, so we just need radius. And then inside here, just call the update method and also the display method. All right, great. So next, I want to create 5 rings of these sentences. So how about I call it text is an array, and then let's do another variable called num, set it to 5, and then inside setup, let's use a for loop to create 5 objects. So I less than num, I plus plus, and then inside here, text of I will be a new type object. So we can just start by using the same sentence here, hello, but the radius, I'm going to actually set this variable as r increment, do it at, how about 30, and then here, r will be equals to r increment multiplied by I plus 1. And I want to add it by 1 because when I equals to 0, then radius will be equals to 0, so I don't want that. And then now we just need to use the same for loop to call the update and the display method on all of the objects, right? So text of I for both of these. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. And I think that's happening because what I just explained earlier of using push and pop, right? We're doing the same thing here because we're using the rotate function and we rotate it by this angle for all of the objects. So we need to also make sure that we put push and pop here so that the rotation doesn't increment for each of the circular ring. So the other pop will be out here. All right. Now what I want to do is that I want to, instead of writing all of the sentence in each of the ring to be the word hello, I want each of the bigger rings to have more of the hello letters. So what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to call this sentence original, and I'm going to set sentence to be equals to sentence, and I can use this method called concat to add more letters, more string of text into my original sentence. So the argument that I want to put in is actually sentence original. Actually, instead of declaring this here, I'm going to declare it outside here as a global variable, and it's going to be of type string. Each of the ring will have one additional word hello inside. So let's try it. All right. So if we stop the update function, you can see that the first ring has 1 hello, the second ring has 2 hello, the third ring has 1, 2, 3 hello, and so on. And now each of the rings are rotating what? At the same direction. What if we change it based on which ring it is? So I'm going to declare one extra parameter called dir for direction, and we're going to use this variable here to multiply it to this.angle, and the direction will be either 1 or -1 for it to rotate clockwise or counterclockwise. So if I go back here, what I want to do is I want to set the direction based on if it's an even ring or if it's an odd ring. And what I can do is I can use a conditional statement that says if I mod 2 is equals to 0. So this expression here is called modulo. And basically what it does is that it returns a remainder between the division of two numbers, in this case between I and 2. But when any number is divided by 2, if it has a remainder of 0, it means that it is an even number, right? Because it can divide by 2 evenly. But if it returns something else, which is 1, then it is an odd number. So in this case, if I mod 2 equals to 0, that means it's an even ring. Then I want the dir to be equals to 1. Actually, I need to set this variable here. And then else, dir will be equals to -1. And then I can just put this as an argument inside here. Alright, so if it's even, it rotates clockwise. If it's odd, then it rotates counterclockwise. To make it more interesting, we're going to incorporate easing functions. So what are easing functions? As you can see here, the rotation that is happening right now is that in each frame, we rotate each of the rings by a certain amount of angle, in this case 1 degree at a time. But what we can do is that we can actually rotate it in a less linear function. This website easings.net show you the different easing functions that we can use to make the transition from the beginning of the animation to the end of the animation, or the end of one of the circular loop, more interesting. For example, this one, ease in quad, it starts out slow and then it speeds towards the end, whereas ease out quad starts out fast and then slow down towards the end. So if you scroll down here, there's a function where, even though this is not in JavaScript, but basically what you need is you need to provide an argument that ranges between a value of 0 and 1, and it is going to return a specific function. In this case, for ease in quad, it returns a quadratic equation, which is that argument multiplied by itself. And what I've done is putting together all of these easing functions based on this website into an easing.js file, and all you need to do is just copy that file and then integrate it into your sketch. And I have already done that. So basically I have this easing.js file with all of the easing functions, as you can see here, and make sure that you integrate it into your index.html file as well. All right, so let's see how you can use this. So let's go to type.js. Inside the update function here, right now we increment the angle by 1 degree at a time. So instead of doing this, we actually want to set this .angle to be equals to one of the easing functions. So let's try is in quad, which is the one that we saw, and we want to increment it between 0 and 1, right? So we're going to put in, actually I'm going to set another variable called amount, start it at 0, and we want to increment it from 0 to 1. So I'm going to put in this as an argument. Then we want to increment it from 0 to 1. So I'm going to write a conditional statement that says if this .amt is greater than 1, we start it back at 0. And then else, we're gonna increment it by a certain amount. And I want to increment it quite small at 0.01. And by doing this, basically, this function is going to return a value between 0 and 1. So we also want to multiply it by a range. For example, we want to rotate it around 1 full revolution of a circle, so 360 degrees. So we want it to return a value of 0 to 360. So if we do this and click run, as you can see here, it's no longer rotating in a linear fashion, right? It's rotating in the ease in quad in a quadratic fashion. But it is quite fast, especially the one that is the most outer ring. So instead of moving it at 1 full revolution of a circle in 1 loop of animation, what if we decrease it to 90? And as you can see here, it doesn't work properly, right? Why? Because every time it restarts the loop of animation, it goes back to where angle equals to 0. And that is expected actually, because we basically get a return value between 0 to 90. So what we actually need also is we need another variable, let's call it min. And this will help us set the beginning value of where we want the rotation to be. So this .min. So what we want is that we want it to go from 0 to 90, then 90 to 180, 180 to 270, and then 270 to 360, and so on, right? So we want to update this .min every time we finish a loop of animation. So inside this conditional statement, we're going to set this .min to be plus equals to 90. And actually, instead of hard coding this number, how about we actually also set it as a variable? Let's call it ankle increment. And we're going to set this dot ankle increment to be equals to 90. And then now it moves at 90 to 180 to 270 to 360. All right. But what we can do additional to this is, what if I actually set this as a parameter here and go back here. So instead of setting a specific increment for each of the rings, we can actually rotate it at different increments. So I want to actually set the increment to be, how about 90 divided by I plus 1. So I want the outer ring to be incrementing at a smaller angle increment. So let's try this. So now the most inner ring moves at 90 degrees. The second ring now moves at 45 degrees, and so on. All right. For the last part, I want to make it more beautiful by changing some colors, changing the font, and maybe making the size a little bit different for each ring. So let's start by changing the color of the background. How about we do it as this nice blue color? All right. And then inside here, I'm going to change the color of my font to be white. So we're going to put in no stroke, and then fill will be 255. And then I actually want to put a new alpha value. So we're going to put this as another parameter here. So this dot A equals to A. So what I want to do is that, let's say that I put in 255 for all of them. So it's the same color here. If I put in 100, then the transparency is less now, right? But what I want to do is actually set the alpha value based on which ring it is. So we can basically just do 255 divided by num times I, right? And make sure that you put A as an argument in here. As you can see, the outermost ring has the highest transparency, and then you cannot see the inner ring anymore. Because why? Because I equals to 0, so you don't see any transparency. So that's not what we want. And actually what I want to do is that I want the most inner ring to have the maximum transparency. So I can do 255 minus this whole thing. All right, and then now first I want to increase the number of rings to 8. Then I also want to change the size. So let's do S for size, and then this dot S equals to S, and we're going to change the size of the text based on which ring it's on. So let S to be equals to, how about I plus 1 times 6. So I want the smallest one to be the size of 6, and then it increments up by 1 from there. That looks pretty good. And then the last thing I want to do is that I want to change the font. And what we can do is come to this arrow here, click the plus sign, and then let's create a folder called fonts. And I'm going to put the new font in here. So click this arrow, click upload file, and this is where you want to drag and drop your font file in here. And once it's uploaded, what you want to do is you want to first declare a variable called font. And I'm going to use a function called preload, and this will allow us to preload the font before we start using it. So inside this preload function, you're going to set font to another function called load font. And then inside here, the argument that you want to put inside is where is your font file. And in our case, it's in the folder called fonts. And then the file name for mine, it's called lexendeca-bold.ttf. So inside here, you need to put inside a quotation marks. So fonts \lexendeca deca-bold.ttf. All right, I'm going to click run just to make sure that it's loading. It's loaded properly. All right, and then now you just need to go back to here, and then down here you want to set text font to the variable font. Not bad. And then last thing that you can actually also change is, how about I set radius 0 equals to, let's say, 50. So I'm going to put the initial radius to be R0 here. So now everything is incremented out. So maybe we put it at 30 and we can increment this a little bit smaller at maybe 25. So it just gives it a different look, and you can just play around, but I think the basic is there for you to start experimenting and have fun with this. So I hope that you like this one and give it a try.